My name's Ethan. I'm 32, an IT specialist, living in Seattle. My girlfriend, Lena, and I have been together for almost 4 years. We moved in together about 2 summers ago. Small apartment, beige walls, one squeaky window that lets in just enough light to make mornings feel soft. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. Every morning, she brewed coffee while I toasted bread. We'd play that same old playlist, the one she called Slow Mornings. It was ordinary, safe, quiet, the kind of life you think will stay the same forever. And then, one day, she mentioned a name. Derek. It started small. Derek bought lunch for everyone today, she said, scrolling through her phone. He said I looked stressed. He's so sweet sometimes. I remember smiling. That's nice of him. And I meant it back then. I didn't feel jealous or suspicious. She worked at a marketing firm full of loud, funny people. They joked, teased, called each other work wife or work husband all the time. It was part of the culture, so yeah. Derek was just another name in her day, until it wasn't, because after that day, he started showing up in every story. Derek fixed a printer. Derek made everyone laugh today. Derek said, there's this Thai place I'd love. I could predict his name before she even said it. One night, she was in the shower, and I walked past her desk. There was a takeout receipt. Thai food, her favorite dish. Pad See-Ew, extra chili. At the bottom of the bill, it said, paid by Derek H. My stomach dropped. When she came out, towel wrapped around her hair, I asked casually, hey, didn't you say you had a team lunch today? She paused, just for a second, then smiled. Yeah, Derek grabbed food for everyone. He loves that place. I nodded, smiled back, and said nothing, but inside, something shifted. Just a small crack, quiet but deep. Over the next few weeks, things changed. She texted less during work. Our usual miss you messages turned into short replies like, busy meeting, talk later. And when she did talk about her day, it was always Derek this, Derek that. One Friday, I decided to surprise her. I had a slow morning, so I drove to her office with coffee and her favorite turkey sandwich. I texted her, hey, I'm downstairs. Thought we could have lunch together. She replied a minute later, oh, that's so sweet. But Derek just brought lunch for the whole team. You didn't have to. I stared at my phone for a long time before typing back, no worries. Next time, then I sat there in the parking lot, coffee turning cold beside me, watching people walk by, laughing, talking, living their small, perfect lives. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I didn't belong in mine. That night, Lena came home late. She said the meeting ran long, but she looked happy, brighter somehow. When she bent down to take off her shoes, I noticed the necklace, a thin silver chain with a tiny charm, not her usual style. That's pretty, I said. When did you get it? She hesitated just long enough for me to notice. Oh, this. Derek gave it to me. Said his girlfriend didn't like it, so he thought I would. My mind blanked. His girlfriend? I asked. She nodded, brushing her hair back. Yeah, they fight all the time. He's dramatic. It's nothing. Trust me. Trust me. Those 2 words hit different when something already feels off. After she fell asleep, I stayed up in the living room, scrolling through old photos of us. Her smile used to reach her eyes. Now it looked softer, distant, and I couldn't shake the thought, what if, somewhere between the laughter and the takeout boxes, I'd already started losing her, and didn't even notice. It doesn't happen all at once. You don't wake up one day and realize your relationship is falling apart. It starts small, little things that don't feel like much at first. But over time, they start to pile up, and suddenly, the person you love feels distant. I'm Ethan, and lately, our apartment doesn't feel like home anymore. Every morning used to start the same way, Lena humming softly in the kitchen. The smell of coffee filling the air, sunlight pouring through the blinds. She'd hand me my cup, smile, and say something like, "Here, I made yours stronger today." But now, mornings are quiet. The coffee tastes the same, but it feels different. And so does she. I noticed it in small moments, like how she started taking her phone everywhere, even to the bathroom, or how she'd smile at something on her screen, then quickly lock it the second I walked into the room. One Thursday, I came home early. Rain was still dripping off my jacket when I opened the door and saw her sitting on the couch. She was laughing. A real laugh, one I hadn't heard in weeks. When she realized I was there, the smile vanished. "Who's that?" I asked, trying to keep my tone casual. "Just a coworker," she said. "We're working on a new project." Just a coworker. I wanted to believe that. God, I wanted to believe it. But something in her voice, calm, distant, didn't sit right that night. When she went to shower, her phone lit up on the table. I didn't mean to look, but the screen was right there, glowing in the dark. A single message read, "Can't stop thinking about your eyes today." My chest went cold. My heart was pounding, but I couldn't move. I just stared at that screen, the words burning into my mind. I didn't touch the phone. I didn't confront her. I just sat there in silence, realizing that something between us had quietly broken. That night, we lay side by side in bed. Her breathing was slow, steady. I wasn't sure if she was asleep or pretending to be. And I lay there, staring at the ceiling, wondering what changed. Was it me? Was I too distracted, too focused on work? Or had she already found something, someone that made her feel alive again? The next morning, I still made coffee for both of us. Old habits die hard, I guess. She came out, already dressed, grabbed her bag, and said, "I have to head out early, big meeting today." "Yeah," I said quietly. "Of course." She took a sip of her coffee, then set it back on the counter. Didn't even finish it. When the door closed behind her, I stood there for a long time, staring at that half-empty cup. The steam was fading, just like us. That night, she came home late again. Her excuse was the same. Work ran long. But there was a faint trace of cologne on her jacket. Not hers, not mine. I didn't ask. I didn't yell. I just stayed quiet. Sometimes silence hurts more than words ever could. As she lay next to me, asleep, or pretending to be, I realized the worst part of losing someone isn't when they walk out the door. It's when they're still lying beside you, but they're already gone. That night, I drove aimlessly. The streets were nearly empty, the yellow streetlights spilling across the wet asphalt like broken glass. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't want to know. I just needed to get away from that house that used to be a home. Now nothing more than a room full of fading memories. The wipers moved slowly across the windshield, keeping rhythm with my thoughts, slow, heavy, uncertain. Images kept flashing through my mind. Her smile, that message, I still remember the way you laughed this afternoon. And her eyes, when she saw me holding her phone, not frightened, not guilty, just tired, as if she'd been waiting for this moment to come. I pulled over and turned off the engine. Rain tapped softly on the roof of the car. Through the windshield, I saw couples walking by, sharing an umbrella, their laughter cutting through the night. And there I was, sitting alone, in the middle of a city that once felt like ours. I remembered the first time I met Lena, a small coffee shop near the old district. She wore a white dress, her hair falling loosely on her shoulders, and that smile that made you believe in love again. Back then, I thought I'd found the one. She had a way of making you feel safe, seen, wanted, and I guess I believed too much in that safety, never thinking that love could have an expiration date. I don't know when it started. Her thing with that guy. A month, 2, maybe longer. But what broke me wasn't the betrayal itself. It was realizing that, somewhere along the way, I'd stopped being needed. I'd become optional. When I set her phone down on the table, I didn't yell, didn't demand an explanation. I just felt empty, like something inside me had quietly disappeared, leaving nothing but the echo of what used to be us. I walked out because I couldn't bear to hear her explain. Because sometimes, the cruelest thing isn't being lied to. It's hearing the person you love lie just well enough to protect you from the truth. By the time I came back home, dawn was breaking. The living room light was still on. She was sitting there, eyes red, looking at me with that same unreadable expression. I walked past her without saying a word. She didn't stop me, and somehow that silence said more than anything ever could. Inside the bedroom, I closed the door and leaned against the wall. The dark felt heavy, but honest. My heartbeat was slow, tired. I thought about everything, the laughter, the quiet nights, the promises whispered in movie theaters. "Ethan, don't ever change," she once said. That line. It used to sound sweet. Now it just hurts. Because the truth is, I didn't change. She did. I sat down on the floor and laughed, softly, bitterly, but sincerely. Maybe I should thank her, because it took losing her for me to finally see how long I'd been living in denial. No one's perfect. No love lasts forever. There are only people who choose to stay and people who choose to leave. And that night, both of us understood, without saying a word, that our story was already over. Her voice came from the living room, quiet and trembling. "Ethan, I'm sorry." I took a breath, replied softly, "I know, but I don't need sorry. I just need a little peace." She said nothing more. And that was the last time we spoke to each other as lovers. The next morning, the apartment felt unusually still. Sunlight slipped through the blinds, falling across the table, the same spot where Lena had sat last night. I stood there for a long time, staring at the tiny scratches on the wooden surface, the ones we used to joke about, calling them the marks of living. Now, they were just proof that something had once been here and wasn't anymore. I wrote a short note. No confrontation, no goodbyes, no scene. Just, "Thank you for the good things. I need some time. Take care." I folded it and left it on the kitchen counter, the same place she used to drop her keys. Then I packed a suitcase, a few clothes, some books, my laptop, everything else, the little keepsakes, the souvenirs I left behind. Too much would only pull me back. When I closed the door, I didn't look back. The hallway smelled faintly of rain from the night before. Seattle was grey, the kind of grey that seeps into you. My footsteps echoed down the corridor, long, hollow, deliberate. A neighbor waved and asked where I was heading. I smiled, said nothing, and kept walking. I drove without a plan, through familiar streets, past the cafe where Lena always ordered a latte, the park where we used to walk on Sundays, the bookstore with the little reading corner. Each place replayed a memory, soft, bittersweet, and sharp all at once. The first night alone was the hardest. Who was going to brew the morning coffee? Who would make sarcastic comments about the songs I played? Who would leave silly post-it notes on the fridge just to make me smile? The apartment felt too big. The TV murmured nonsense. I ate dinner in silence and washed only one plate. It felt strange to sleep on one side of the bed, waiting for footsteps that would never come. That night, I walked down to the river. The water shimmered under the streetlights, golden and broken. I sat on a wet bench, zipped up my jacket, and wondered, had I lost something or found something? I pulled out my phone. Lena's name glowed on the screen like a small, persistent ghost. My thumb hovered over it. Then I set the phone down. Some silences are the most honest kind of goodbye. Days turned into weeks. I started building little rules for myself, a fragile rhythm of living. Morning runs by the river, coffee from the corner bakery, work emails, long showers, reading one chapter of a book I never finished. At night, I cooked meals for one and forced myself to call old friends, laughing at nothing just to remember how it felt. Mark, an old friend, met me for a drink one Friday night. He looked at me and asked, "You doing okay?" I remember answering, "I'm fine," the kind of fine people say when they're not. We both laughed. Neither of us meant it. Sometimes I'd open old emails, photos of us at the beach, her messages full of warmth, the one she sent when I got sick. It felt like reading a story written by two people who no longer existed. Part of me smiled. Another part broke all over again. Weeks passed. Pain didn't disappear. It just changed shape. At first, it was a knife, sharp and constant. Then it became a scar, dull, faint, but still there. I learned not to hide it. I learned to live around it. One evening, I found a letter tucked inside an old book, something Lena must have forgotten. She had written about a summer afternoon when we took silly pictures at the park, laughing until our faces hurt. I smiled, reading it, a small, quiet smile, and for the first time, it didn't hurt to remember Dot. Slowly, life built itself again. I started working harder, not to escape, but to live. I learned new recipes, joined a running group, rediscovered music she used to hate. Little by little, I began to exist again, without the constant need to forget. Some days were still heavy. A song, a scent, a random street corner would pull her back into my mind. When that happened, I let it. I let myself feel it, cry if I had to, and then keep moving. I learned how to hold myself, something I'd never known I needed to do. Months later, one quiet afternoon, I realized something had shifted. I was sitting in a small cafe, the same kind of place we used to love. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was performing the act of being okay. I just was. Not healed, not perfect, but breathing without effort. The coffee was warm in my hands, the city humming outside, and for a fleeting second, I felt whole. That night, my phone buzzed. A message from Lena's mum. "Ethan, I know things weren't easy between you two. I just hope you're taking care of yourself." I stared at the screen for a while. It wasn't the message itself, it was the kindness behind it. Sometimes, the people outside the story hold more grace than the ones living it. I typed back slowly, "Thank you. I hope you and Lena are both doing okay." Short, honest, enough to close a chapter I no longer needed to keep open. I set my phone down and stepped out onto the balcony. The air was cool, damp with the smell of rain and earth. Below, the city flickered windows, lighting up and fading out, like the quiet pulse of a heart that keeps going. For the first time in months, I felt peace. Not because I'd forgotten, but because I'd finally learned to let go. Some people walk through your life not to stay, but to teach you how to love and how to release. A year had passed since the day I walked out of that apartment. Life had slowly settled into a quiet rhythm. No more waking up to emptiness. No more long nights filled with silence. I still lived in Seattle, but in a smaller neighborhood near the lake. Every morning I jogged along the water, watching sunlight scatter over the mist, then stopped by a familiar cafe for a black coffee and read the paper in peace. Life wasn't exciting, but it wasn't lost anymore. I wasn't necessarily happy, but I was steady, learning to live with the spaces that once ached. One chilly October afternoon, I got a text from Mark. "Hey, there's a photo exhibit downtown this weekend. You in?" I said yes. No special reason, just thought maybe it was time to be around people again. That Saturday, I arrived at the gallery, a cozy place, warm yellow light, faint smell of coffee in the air. Photos of the city hung on the walls, streets, faces, little moments that somehow carried entire emotions. I was standing in front of a picture of a rainy street when I heard a familiar voice behind me. That one was taken at Pioneer Square. It was pouring that day. I'll never forget it. I turned around. It was Lena. She hadn't changed much. The same calm eyes, the same gentle smile, but there was something different about her. Maybe it was the stillness, the kind that only comes after you've been through a storm. For a few seconds, we just looked at each other. No words, just that quiet moment when everything from the past flashed between us. I nodded slightly. "It's been a while." She smiled back. "Yeah, it really has." We moved to a quieter corner. No blame, no old questions. Just to people who once shared a life, now meeting again when the storm had finally passed. She told me she was freelancing as a photographer, sometimes traveling, sometimes staying in town. I told her I was still doing the same job, taking a design course on the side. Our words were simple, light. But beneath it, I could feel something stirring, not pain, just a faint ache of nostalgia after a pause. Lena looked at me and said softly, "Ethan, I know things weren't easy back then, but I really hope you're happy." I took a breath, met her eyes, and smiled. "I hope you are too." That was it. Nothing more needed to be said. The silence between us was no longer heavy. It was peaceful, even warm. We said goodbye outside the gallery. She turned and walked away, her figure blending into the crowd. I stood there for a moment, watching her disappear into the autumn air. The breeze carried the scent of rain and coffee, and for the first time, my chest didn't tighten. That night, I walked home along a street covered in golden leaves. Under the streetlights, the city felt strangely alive again. I found myself smiling, not because I was overjoyed, but because I finally realized I had made it through. Seeing Lena again didn't make me want to go back. It reminded me that sometimes growing up isn't about starting over. It's about being able to stand in front of your past, smile, and keep walking. Spring returned to Chicago with its gentle warmth. The snow melted, the lake turned blue again, and sunlight began to spill through my apartment window, painting soft gold over the wooden floor. It had been over a year since Lena and I finally ended things. I didn't think about her as much anymore. Still, on some quiet afternoons, her memory found its way back, not as pain, but as a kind of tenderness that had already faded. I was still working at the same design firm, but I had changed. I no longer buried myself in work just to forget. I learned to stop, to breathe, to notice the small things, and to listen, really listen, to myself one Saturday morning. While reading at a small cafe near my apartment, a voice came from behind me. "Hey, you're the guy who always sits by the window, right?" I looked up. A young woman stood there, brown hair, beige sweater, holding a sketchbook. She smiled, soft but confident. "Do you work here?" I asked. She shook her head. "No, I just draw." "See." She opened her sketchbook, and there I was, sitting by the window, coffee cup in hand, lost in thought. I couldn't help but laugh. "You drew me." She smiled wider. "You looked calm, like you didn't need to rush anywhere." I thought that was beautiful. Her name was Claire, a freelance illustrator who had just moved into the neighborhood. We talked for a while about art, books, and how people rebuild themselves after losing something or someone after that day. I still sat by the same window each morning, but this time I wasn't alone. Claire would bring coffee and waffles. I'd bring 2 mugs. Sometimes we talked. Sometimes we didn't. And somehow that silence felt just right. One afternoon, as we walked by the lake, Claire asked, "If you could say one thing to your ex, what would it be?" I paused for a long moment before answering. I'd say, "Thank you," because she taught me how to love and how to let go. Claire smiled, not in joy, but in understanding. We kept walking as the sun sank low over the water, turning the sky a soft orange. That's when I realized love never truly disappears. It just changes shape, becomes a kind of gentle light we carry within us, quietly, through the rest of our lives. That summer, Chicago seemed to glow in a softer light, calmer, warmer, almost forgiving. The streets I used to walk felt familiar, yet somehow lighter. Cafes buzzed with quiet laughter, morning chatter, and the smell of roasted beans drifting through open doors. I used to sit in those places, staring blankly at my coffee, replaying memories that refused to fade. Now I sit and just watch, not searching for anyone in the crowd, just breathing, just living. That morning, sunlight slipped through the blinds, brushing across the sheets. I got up, brewed coffee, and played the same song Lena once hated. Funny, it didn't sting anymore. The melody didn't belong to her now. It belonged to this moment, to my small kitchen, to the quiet peace I'd built for myself. I looked at my reflection in the mirror, not the broken version I used to avoid, but someone calm, steady, and alive. That's when I understood something. No one really gets over someone else. We just learn to carry them differently, not as wounds, but as faint scars, that remind us where we've been and how much we've grown. In the cabinet sits a mug Lena once gave me. I don't use it often, but I keep it. Not because I can't let go, but because it's part of a life I don't want to erase. Every scratch on that cup, every faded word, feels like proof that I once lived fully, messily, and with love. One evening, Claire, the woman from my photography class, asked if I wanted to walk by the lake. The air smelled of grass and rain. The water mirrored streaks of orange light as the sun dipped low. She told me about her dream of opening a small gallery, a place where people could feel something just by standing in front of a picture. Her voice was warm, steady, the kind that didn't demand anything from me. I listened, realizing how long it had been since I simply enjoyed someone's company. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was comfort, the kind that doesn't rush you. After a while, Claire turned to me and asked, "Do you ever think about starting over?" I smiled faintly and said, "Every day. You just have to be brave enough to live it." That night, I sat by the window with my old journal, the same one filled with pages of pain and sleepless thoughts. I flipped to the last page and wrote, "There's no real ending, only quiet beginnings, the kind that happen when you stop trying to forget and start learning how to live again." I closed the notebook and looked out at the city. Thousands of windows glowed against the night, each one holding a story, a heartbeat, a small universe. For the first time in a long while, I felt part of it again, not lost, not broken, just here. I don't wonder about Lena anymore. Wherever she is, I hope she found peace too. Love doesn't always need a perfect ending to mean something. Sometimes it just needs to teach you how to understand, how to forgive, and how to open your heart again even when it's still afraid. I sat there for a long time, listening to the hum of the city below, the soft traffic, the wind against the glass, the rhythm of life continuing. Chicago kept breathing, and so did I. I'm not the Ethan I was before, not the man who kept looking backward, but someone new, grateful for the past, calm in the present, and open to whatever comes next. I smiled, closed my eyes, and took a deep breath. In that breath, I tasted life, quiet, free, and mine.